everybody. Welcome to Mile High Sports Today. I'm Sean Drotar. That right there is Nate Lundy. Week 3 of the NFL season is upon us. We'll have a chance to talk with TJ Rives, the sideline reporter for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the Buccaneers radio network. We'll break down the Bucs, a team that is in, let's just say, a better position than the Broncos at this stage. In many
come
ways.
on. There's a ton of teams like that.
That doesn't help, and that doesn't help at all, Nate. Tons of teams are better.
There's
than
a bunch
the
of teams that are better.
Well, it's true. Obviously, Buccaneers are 2-0. They get the Broncos on Sunday, and the Broncos, obviously, the first thing they need to fix. We've talked about the offense, and that's certainly the case. But let's drill down even a little deeper into that, Nate, because it's not only the offense, but it's the offense in the red zone, in which they have gotten worse. Last year, the Broncos' touchdown conversion rate in the red zone was 51.7%. So just about 50-50. Not one of the best in the league, as you can imagine. But when you're talking about this year, and it's only 2 games in, and I get it. You have a rookie quarterback, and I get it. But there's 51%, and there's 14%, 14.3 to be exact, which is what the Denver Broncos are doing in the red zone this season. 7 trips, 1 touchdown, 14.3%, dead last in the NFL. Was not helped by 0 for 3 against the Steelers last week.
No, absolutely not. And those numbers are going to continue to be something that they struggle with within the red zone. They need to find a way to be able to get points that don't involve the number 3. And I'm not opposed to that. They need to get some field goals. They need to get scoring on the board. But at the same time, you do need to find a way to capitalize on these opportunities, because with an offense that is missing some of those elite players, that is missing some of the true playmakers, as they would be described by any NFL fan, not just me or you, without those things, you're going to wind up with a lot of drives that don't give you that opportunity. Excuse me, ones that don't get to the red zone.
Right.
Drives that are going to stall out the 40, 45-yard line. And then we can have debates over whether Will Lutz should be kicking a field goal or not. But you're going to have those drives stall out. And so when you do actually cross, I'm even going to say the 30, the 25, I think you need to find ways to be able to capitalize on that. And I think some of it is going to come from some different play calling. Some of it is going to be trying to confuse the defense a bit in terms of how you decide to run, how you don't decide to run. And I also believe, and this is true between the 20s as well, and we've talked about it this week as well, you need to allow some play calls to, leave your lips and go into his ears, that allow him to roll out and allow him to get out of the pocket and allow him to get to places where he is comfortable and that he can make plays and he can do a little bit of the improvising, because we've seen success there.
This sounds like you were just I know you were talking about Bo Nix, but if you would have said this a year ago, talking about Russell Wilson, it seems like you would have said the exact same thing.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we would have said the same things, and that's been the common denominator on the shows for, now the 4th day this week, Sean, is we believe that the common denominator in all of this is, in fact, Sean Payton, and that he needs to do some things differently, and he needs to trust some of the people around him to give him some advice and to talk to his quarterback and say, what do I need to be able to do to help you be more comfortable? As the saying often goes, if you think you're the smartest person in the room, you're not.
Or at least get in a better room.
So, fix that. And I think that's some of what Sean Payton needs to be able to do. And I think he needs to show it when those opportunities present themselves in the red zone.
Yeah, obviously there is a lot to take a look at. We had an opportunity to there's a quote by Cortland Sutton, who I love it, because it's sort of that obvious. It's not as good as Bo Nix's drop back, threw it to the other team, but pretty straightforward. He wrote a
line of the year.
Yeah, Sutton said a field goal is nice, and I trust that will get us those points when those 3 points when we need them. But we need to find a way to score touchdowns. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, right? But Sutton also pointed out the defense played their butts off to give us a chance. Even 1 touchdown would have changed the game last week. It's going to take all of us. And he's right. It's not complicated to say, yeah, you need 7 rather than 3. But the question now is how do you find a way to do it? And you are going to be missing Mike McGlinchey, the starting right tackle, for the next 4 games, placed on the injured reserve. That's a problem. Alex Palczewski, who came in and replaced him, will start in his place. So presumably both the running game and the passing game will be affected, because if Palczewski, and I get it that the next man up is great and all that sort of stuff, but if Palczewski was considered a starting caliber right tackle in this league, he'd probably be starting. So it's a downgrade. and that's going to increase the challenges for the Broncos. Obviously, there's not much they can do to fix it, Nate. You just kind of have to keep on keeping on.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's just where you're at. And we talked about this some yesterday on the show that, there are plenty of positions that we can sit back and that, which means if we can, the organization can, and see where improvement is needed. They just can't. Right now, they can't. What they have right now is what they're going to have. And you're going to need the next man up type of mentality. And, I'm kind of a believer that if somebody's a backup, they're a backup for a reason. So I think you're going to see some things that drop off. Pro Football Focus has the Broncos offensive line ranked right in the middle of everything. But I think that offensive line ranking that PFF has is also based on what they've seen out of the first 2 weeks, which means they haven't seen them without McGlinchey. They haven't seen some of those things yet. And so I think that you're going to see the Broncos offensive line dip. I think you're going to see them drop from where they are in that ranking. And I think that their performance is going to slide down, which is why, again, I think you need to try to do some things within that play calling that eliminate the pocket, that eliminate the need for a perfectly clean pocket. We can pull up stats, till we're blue in the face about, his pass completion is X with a clean pocket. Well, bleep, I sure hope so.
Yeah,
right. I mean, every quarterback should have a better passing completion rate when they've got a clean pocket. So I don't want to look at that. I want to look at, are we creating enough opportunities to disguise things to a defense and get the ball downfield and do some of the things that are going to open up the ability to try to build up that run game that we've been harping on now for what feels like 3 months.
Yeah, there isn't anywhere to go but up. The running game for Pro Football Focus has the Broncos at 31st in the league ahead
if
of
they could rank them at like 38th, they would.
Passing, they are 31st in the league ahead of only the Carolina Panthers. And that means that overall offensively, they're dead last, 48.8 behind the Panthers, not even at the 50% mark, the worst offense in the NFL. And I think that matches the eye test. That's where the analytics and the eye test sync up. It's hard to be much worse on offense than the Denver Broncos have been on offense in their first couple of games. And everybody understands that. The problem that I wonder about, Nate, is that I think their first 2 games against the Seahawks and the Steelers were more winnable than their next 2 games against the Bucs and the Jets, both on the road. And so if the win, because safe to say you and I think they're going to be 0-4.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I told you yesterday, they're going to lose both these next 2 games by double figures.
So they're going to likely be 0-4. And if that's the case, then what would you be looking for starting this week against Tampa Bay that would make you feel that they're trending in the right direction again, rather than the wrong direction?
I simply want to continue to see Bo Nix get better. That's what I'm looking for. I want to see more opportunities for him to be able to move the ball. And I think the way to be able to make him get better is not just in his performance, it's in what plays you're asking him to call. So I think it goes hand in hand with Sean Payton. But the only way that we are truly going to be able to judge it is for Bo Nix to have the success. That's ultimately what it takes. And so if that means that Cortland Sutton needs to be better, then be better, Court. If it means that Sean Payton needs to simplify some of his play calls, then simplify the play calls. If it means that the next man up on the offensive line needs to play better, then that's what has to happen. But ultimately, the entire 2024 football season for this Broncos squad is going to be judged on how Bo Nix progresses as a starting quarterback.
Did you see growth from week 1 to week 2?
Yes.
And what do you want to see? What's realistic growth against Tampa? What would it look like?
I think it's a matter of not having any regression, right? So we talked a little bit earlier this week about the idea that he seemed to pick up a little bit of the game speed, if you will, in the game against Pittsburgh, and that he was not throwing the ball behind receivers the way that he was in Seattle. Okay. We saw that. That's a use your own eyes. I see it, right?
Right.
We saw that out of Bo Nix between week 1 and week 2. So I think one of the things that's interesting about going into Tampa on Sunday is that it doesn't necessarily mean that I now need to see another step. It's that I need to make sure that I don't see him go back, right? I need to make sure that I don't see what I saw in Seattle emerge again because he's on the road. because you want to make sure that that's not getting into his head. This idea of being on the road, you got a hostile crowd, maybe they're being loud. They're trying to keep you from being able to do things in the huddle or do things at the line of scrimmage. So you want to make sure that he doesn't regress back into that. And to me, some of his progression as a rookie quarterback over the course of all 17 games is based on the idea of it can be a baby step forward as long as it doesn't vanish. Because then you're required to take another step just to make up for what you already had. So as long as he is progressing this way and we're not going in reverse at all, it's okay with me if he stays in first gear, right? Like, I don't need him to go from first to fifth. As long as he's making forward momentum, I'm okay with it. So I think part of it, Sean, going back to your question, is he can show me progress by not going backwards.
Okay.
Right.
And that's
that's my basis.
That's a low bar, admittedly, right?
But I'm okay with the low bar.
Yeah. And keep in mind, too, that your growth is not going to be this 45-degree angle line that goes from point A to point B. It doesn't work like that, because I agree. I thought he was better from week 1 to week 2. I thought that he was obviously got used to the game speed a little bit, not entirely. What I would like to see in this case is I'd like to see him less, again, things your eyes can see. I'd like to see him less rushed. I'd like to see him throw the ball with better footwork. I'd like to see him not hurry as much. I'd like to see him feel like he maybe has the time to look off his first receiver and go to second receiver, even if the play doesn't end up being complete. I think that needs to be the next jump. Right now, this feels like it's all game speed stuff, and that includes the getting into the verbiage and getting all the verbiage back out from Sean Payton. It's all about speed, so it's got to slow down for Bo Nix. I think that's the next step. But I liked some of what I saw. I thought he was more rushed in his decision-making when he actually got the passes out. And to me, that was a little tiny step backwards. What I want to see is that jump forwards and realize that he looks more quite frankly, in control. I would liken Bo Nix to a skier, right? You have it out there on the ski slopes. And you see someone who's going pretty fast down the hill, but doesn't look entirely like they're in control. Right? Looks like they can kind of wipe out at any second. Yeah. Danny Bailey's a big skier. He knows what I'm talking about there, our producer. And you run into a situation where those guys could be a little dangerous. Sure. They can get other people hurt. And so that's the concern, I think, for Bo Nix. I don't mind the speed is what it is. I just want him looking like he's not 1 second away from wiping out and having a yard sale on the middle of the slope. And it will come. But I don't know if it will come this week. We just need to see more progress when we're talking about that kind of performance. And
like I said, I want to come back to this. Be okay with the fact that part of his progress is not having regression.
Yeah.
Because some of that is, okay, great. You made these improvements, but if you go back to bad habits, then you didn't actually improve. So that's why I'm trying to say, like, if I'm trying to overly simplify this and be able to say
mistakes twice
and be able to say, I need him to go from a 1, which is where he started, to a 20. Okay. That's where I want him to get by the end of his rookie year. And however you want to judge those numbers on that ladder. What I'm trying to say is if he goes from 1 to 2, if the next game he stays at a 2, sometimes you need to be okay with that as a fan and recognize that that is part of the growth. He didn't go back to a bad habit. He stayed right where he was. So that maybe by week 4, then he makes that jump to 3. See what I'm saying? Like, that's what I'm trying to say. This idea of 1 step forward, 2 steps back. If he regresses, that is 2 steps back. So you need to make sure that whatever has happened, whatever learning curve is going on inside his head, and I believe that Bo Nix is a smart guy, that whatever learning curve is happening sticks.
Yeah.
And stays with him. That's what I'm looking for.
It's about getting traction in a lot of ways, and we'll see what the Broncos do. We'll have a chance to talk about the Buccaneers with TJ Rives in just a little bit, but there's a lot to talk about in the NFL too, and talking about other quarterbacks, and we'll get to that momentarily.
And a guy that is considering what it might look like to be an NFL quarterback is, of course, Shedeur Sanders and the CU Buffs. And we want to remind you that the Buffs have a big game, home game, coming up this Saturday night. And if you're not actually going to be at Folsom Field, make sure you're with us for our watch parties. We do that at number 38 for every single CU game, home and away. It is a great spot to be able to take in the games. They've got that giant LED screen outside. They got the TVs on the inside. They got great food. They've got great beer and spirits, especially those local Colorado breweries that you know I love so much. The food is fantastic, but most importantly, it's a chance for you to be able to go in a great atmosphere and kick back and watch the game. You know that we are getting closer and closer. It's now less than 3 weeks away from the start of the season for the Avs. You know that we'll be counting it down to the Nuggets as well before too long. And you know that's also where we will be for these watch parties. When we do the watch parties, like what we're going to do this Saturday night for CU and Baylor, it also means that we've got some giveaways for you. And then, of course, our friends at High Noon that are co-sponsoring with us these watch parties, they've got drink specials for you as well, the Buckets of High Noon. So all of that comes together at number 38 in Rhino. Come join us for the game this Saturday. Bring along some friends. Kick back and relax. And if you want to, go to number 38's website ahead of Saturday. They've actually got a deal you can do if you want to reserve like your own table, right? So you and a bunch of your friends, and it comes with a certain amount of drinks and food and things like that that are all included in that reservation that you make. So check them out on their website if you want to, but if nothing else, just come down and join us. And if it's anything like what the first 3 games have been like, get there just a little bit early, okay? Don't be thinking you're going to get there like 15 minutes before kickoff. I recommend at least 45 minutes to an hour before kickoff so you can come in, set up shop with where you want to be able to grab some drinks, grab some food, and like I said, bring your friends down. You know we will be there. Looking forward to seeing you Saturday night at number 38.
Yeah, obviously huge game for the Buffs. Their Big 12 debut in a conference with Baylor up there at Folsom Field at the 4th consecutive primetime game for the Buffaloes to get going here to start the season.
If only primetime guaranteed wins.
Well, you know, the funny thing is it's an interesting opportunity. They go ahead and win that. They're 3-1. Maybe we have something to talk about here. But there are a lot of stories going in as week 3 begins for the NFL tonight. We'll get into the Thursday night football game in just a bit. But the big news is Bryce Young, 18 games into his career, the former number 1 overall pick, goes 2-16 in those games. Although the idea of quarterbacks getting stuck with the win-loss record is unfair for a lot of different reasons. But Bryce Young benched in favor of Andy Dalton, who will turn 37 in just about a month. I'm surprised by this, maybe not shocked by it, but surprised by it. What surprises me is the idea that already the discussion isn't this is going to maybe be a setback, but, oh, Bryce Young was a bust and it's time to move on. And what about his next team? That to me seems a little premature, but maybe I'm off.
Well, but, welcome to the, immediacy of the way culture is right now, regardless of whether we're talking about sports or otherwise. He was an overall number 1 pick, as you said, which means you have an immense amount of pressure. You've got a spotlight on you that maybe you deserve, maybe you don't deserve.
You're starting immediately.
You start
likely the worst team in the league.
You start immediately. There's a reason your team had the number 1 overall pick. Remember, it's because they sucked. And they had to go out there and get you. You're talking about a team that if we start to judge things like we were talking about Pro Football Focus, for example, start to talk about what Pro Football Focus has to say about their offensive line. It's not very nice. They're not very kind words when they talk about that offensive line. There's not a lot of weapons and things like that around him. So does he need to perform better? Of course, you can't throw for 250 whatever yards, 0 touchdowns and 4 picks and only complete 55% of your passes. That's a problem. But anybody that believes this is a Bryce Young only problem is wrong. There's a lot of things wrong with the Panthers right now. Do I think they made the right decision in terms of benching him? I don't know, Sean, because I go back and forth on this because I do think that it's possible that he's putting more pressure on himself than he needs, and maybe the opportunity to stand there and watch the game from the sideline and pick up on some of those things might be beneficial to him. But so much of this is dependent upon the coaching staff that you have and the players that you have around you. I've talked on this show before about Blake Bortles and the story that I shared about him when he was in Jacksonville, and he talked about how they didn't know what to do. Well, that's a coaching thing. As much as anything else. I will go to not Derek, but David Carr. David Carr spent more time on his ass in Houston than he did in a clean pocket.
Yeah.
I mean, he set records for how many times that he was sacked in his rookie year, as well as his career that he spent in Houston. There are so many examples, I believe, in sports, and it's all what if. And I understand that we're playing a lot of the what if game, but I mean, I don't know. Let me go to the NBA for you here for a second, Sean. What if the Blazers had drafted Jordan? Would he still have been Jordan? Maybe. but they took Sam Bowie instead.
Mhm.
Houston then took Olajuwon. Jordan went third.
Nobody picks on that pick with Olajuwon going number one.
No.
That one worked out. But
if we had seen any number of quarterbacks go into and I'm talking highly rated quarterbacks. And I know that I'm playing a little bit of a game here with the time machine with Doc Brown, but imagine if the year that the Texans had that pick to be able to take David Carr, that was the year that Peyton Manning and Ryan Leaf were coming out. And let's say they had taken Peyton Manning instead. I mean, Peyton's one of the smartest quarterbacks I've ever seen on the field. But how much do you get the opportunity to see that, or how long would it have taken him to get to the point of being PFM if he was trying to do it behind that offensive line? So there's a lot of things that have to come right, I believe, for a quarterback to be good. And the number one thing is the talent. And so I'm not saying that Bryce Young doesn't need to be playing better and needs to be able to show more talent. As I said, you can't throw for 250, no touchdowns, 4 picks, and 50 whatever % completion rate and expect to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. You have to do better.
Right.
But the team around you has to be better as well. And those are circumstances that, unfortunately, right now, Bryce Young can't control.
And the Broncos will face a guy that knows a little bit about that. Baker Mayfield talked about it this week, about the idea. And he said, obviously, my career didn't begin in the same time frame as Bryce, but quarterback's hard, especially for young guys when you're not surrounded with the pieces and not given the opportunity to have success. A lot of the time, guys have the talent, they might have the brains, but they don't have the right opportunity or the right fit. I'm sitting here right now, he's talking about being in Tampa, in a way better fit than the other places I've been. That's not to put other teams down, but it's a matter of the pieces around you and the coaches. And for Bryce, a guy that I can relate to this, finding that belief within yourself again, he'll get it. His story is far, far from finished. I think when you're talking about a guy like Bryce Young, who is universally, even more than Baker Mayfield, when he was the number one overall pick in 2018, Young was universally the number one selection. Nobody questioned that. The fact that most of the year, even in college, who will have the opportunity to pick Bryce Young? I think when teams universally believe this guy's got the ability to be the number one pick in the draft, I have to believe that enough talent is there. And so if I'm one of the teams that is looking for a quarterback in the offseason, or maybe even now, who knows how quickly Carolina wants to turn the page, I'm okay being Bryce Young's second team if I feel that I have the right pieces around him or the right coaches around him. Mayfield has been able to turn his career around. He had that brief stint with the Panthers, then went to the Rams, in which he looked very good with the Rams, and then parlayed that into his new deal with the Bucs. And it is, I think, a cautionary tale. And I go to it because the temptation, I think, with people with Bo Nix is already to say, oh, see, he was a bust. Over on My Life Sports right now, our own Mark Knudsen, not a man short of opinions, hinted that maybe the scouts are right about Bo Nix, that perhaps, he's a second round or third round guy with maybe some upside and not considered a cornerstone starter. It's too soon. It's too soon. And it's too soon based on the fact that Denver Broncos, I gave you some of those Pro Football Focus numbers. They have the worst offense in the league, according to Pro Football Focus. They have the 28th best defense in the league. Because even though we look at the Broncos and go, wow, they held Seattle and Pittsburgh to low point totals. Yeah, well, Seattle's offense is okay, and Pittsburgh's is terrible. So they didn't get a lot of credit for that. And I think that's relatively fair. So you have a bad football team talent-wise. You have a team that seems to be, even though the coach has now had 2 years to bring in his guys, and the vast majority of the Denver Broncos are players that Sean Payton has brought in since he's become the head coach. It doesn't seem to be a particularly good fit. And that's what Mayfield is talking about too, the right opportunity or the right fit. And that may not be there with Bryce Young. The concern is whether that's there for Bo Nix for the Broncos too, but we'll have to just wait and see as we continue to find that out. But obviously pretty substantial change there. Bryce Young has started 18 games, and already that's it. Jordan Love for the Packers, back at practice already. So a good sign there. Might even be able to play Sunday for Green Bay, who obviously is concerned with their start, but now has an opportunity if Jordan Love comes back quickly, maybe the playoff chances that we were talking about before the season are still there.
Well, and I think they are still there, but I'll also say this, and I think Green Bay knows this and knows it well. Like, man, don't rush him. right?
This guy is your franchise.
I mean, yeah. And so, do I think they need to have him back out there to be able to have success? Hell yeah, because they don't have squat at a backup quarterback position. But at the same time,
Malik Willis was taking the steps when they beat the Colts.
Yeah.
And you won.
Yeah. No, they did. He did exactly what they needed him to do. Come in and find a way to lead the team to a win.
You only had 2 incompletions.
But I think what you have to recognize, though, is that when do you need Jordan Love? You need Jordan Love starting around. You need to make sure you've got him starting. I'll even go on a wide window starting November 1. Right? Like if you had to get by with your backup for a couple more weeks,
you would Murderers Row. Let me tell you, they've got.
Would it be the worst? Because real quick, I want to point out. Remember what we have been talking about. The AFC is harder than the NFC. It is a harder path to make it to the playoffs in the AFC than it is in the NFC. And Green Bay knows that. I understand that they've got Detroit in their division, but just make the dance and then worry about how you're playing. And I'd much rather have a 100% Jordan Love than try to find a way to win a game at the end of September.
Yeah, they're at the Titans this weekend. That's not a particularly good team. They will take on the Vikings, who are off to a nice start. But and they'd like to have. But if I'm looking at Jordan Love, I'm like, I've been nice to have him back for the Vikings, but I don't know if I care about the Titans. Malik Willis gets a revenge game. I don't know. And then they get the Rams, who we thought were maybe a little bit, at least if I'm off to a bad start. Thought they're a little better team than they've showed. And then they get the Cardinals on the 13th. Obviously, they're a better team than a lot of people expected. But yeah, I wouldn't rush that if I were them. I get the idea. You want your quarterback back. You have a much better chance of winning games with Jordan Love than you do Malik Willis. But at the same time, I'm with you. If you rush him back and he gets hurt, well, then what was the point? You won an early game against the Titans? You might have won that anyway. If Josh Jacobs continues to do what he did in the last game. So I don't think there's a reason to rush him back, but it's obviously good news. You'd like to have him back as soon as possible because not only is your cornerstone, but I think for football fans, he's an entertaining watch. That's part of it too. So,
well, sure. I mean, he has the potential to be one of those tune-in type quarterbacks here over the next few seasons, and that's something that the league is looking for. We talked about this earlier this week about the television ratings and things like that, and even at the way the passing numbers are down, the passing touchdowns are down, and we talked about the difference you've got with some running quarterbacks. Well, look, if those are going to be the kind of people that folks are tuning in, to be able to watch, if those are the Jordan Loves and the Lamar Jacksons of the world, that you get this dual threat, which makes it equally as exciting no matter what the play call is, then yeah, you need the ability to have these guys out on the field if you're the NFL, because you want those television ratings and it's exciting and people want to be able to watch.
Well, the Pro Football Hall of Fame's class of 2025, the Hall announced 167 modern era candidates. Obviously, that will be slimmed down, but there will be 16 players who became eligible this year. Eli Manning probably leads the names there. Marshall Yanda, all pro as well. One of those guys. And for the Broncos, 3 representatives. Vernon Davis played briefly with the Broncos at tight end. Aqib Talib, of course, and then
and DT,
the late great Demaryius Thomas. Unfortunately, I don't think any of those guys are going to be Hall of Famers.
No.
But it's an interesting discussion because I think Eli Manning is a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yes.
But I get when you look at some of the stats where people say, like, well, he necessarily isn't. If he is, when, Phillip Rivers should be. Well, Phillip Rivers didn't win 2 Super Bowls. And he didn't win 2 Super Bowls over the Patriots, and they're at the peak of their strength. So, no, I see that as being an opportunity for Manning. But a couple Broncos in that mix, obviously, that's kind of fun as well. But we'll turn our attention to the game for the Broncos here now. 0-2, going to face off against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are 2-0 and look pretty good behind Baker Mayfield. A man who's had a chance to see that in person is TJ Rives. TJ is the sideline reporter for the Buccaneers Radio Network. Thanks for carving out some time to talk to us, TJ. Really appreciate it.
Hey, great to be with you guys in the Mile High City, and we're looking forward to this one coming up this week. How are things? How are things there?
I'm guessing that the Buccaneers are looking forward to this. If they've seen the Denver Broncos in their first couple of games and what passes for their offense, they will be taking on a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix. I would imagine things are feeling pretty good down in Tampa, not only after the start, but looking at who they've got in their own stadium for Game 3.
Yeah, variable, though, is injuries for the Buccaneers. Everybody's got injuries the first couple of weeks because, let's tell the truth, nobody's going full contact in training camp and in preseason games anymore. And so you go out and everybody goes full blast for week 1 and week 2. And it's not a surprise that you've got injuries galore all over the NFL. So the three that you would be the most concerned about for the Buccaneers, Kalijah Kancey and Vita Vea, the 2 defensive tackles, the stalwarts up the middle of the Buccaneer defense, both former number 1 picks. Vita Vea, a Pro Bowler, an all-pro defensive tackle. Kancey's not been able to play the first 2 games. Right now, still not able to practice as we go into practice on Thursday. Vita Vea injured knee during the Detroit game last week, not practicing, not likely to play. They haven't officially said that as of yet. That's advantage Broncos. And in the back end, it's still a question mark, probably not for Antoine Winfield Jr., who's as good a safety as there is in the NFL. Couldn't play last week. And again, it's an ankle injury. Probably not going to play this week. That's me saying that, but who knows? Maybe he can go this week. That's 3 big minuses for the Buccaneer defense. So it kind of equalizes with Bo Nix as a rookie quarterback in this scenario that the Bucs don't have those 3 guys.
TJ, when you look at what the Broncos come in with, though, they're also dealing with injuries on their offensive line. And so some of what you just talked about is actually going to probably cancel each other out. So let me talk about the offensive play, and in particular Baker Mayfield. Is there something in particular that you can put your finger on when it comes to Mayfield as to why this change of scenery on the west coast of Florida has been such a positive for him?
He has embraced this situation, and now this situation and the fans have embraced him. I think it's the first time, Nate, honestly, in a couple of years where he's felt like he's wanted back, because my joke is, and I've been using this for years, he's been passed around like the offering plate at church by Cleveland, by Carolina. Then the Rams briefly didn't want to re-sign him after he briefly played there. But he came in, and I know there were some struggles in the middle of last season. They were very good at the beginning of the year. He won the opening game and played brilliantly at Minnesota, loud environment. They won again in the Superdome against the Saints, which has been a real bugaboo for the Bucs on the road, again early on in the year. And everybody's going, holy cow, Baker Mayfield. A little bit of a swoon in the middle, but down the stretch of the season, last-minute win at Atlanta, winning in Lambeau where the Bucs had never won in December, ever. In their 30 games of playing the Packers, and at least 10 of them were in December. They had never won there. They won there and helped make the playoffs, helped win a playoff game. So now you cycle through. He could have walked. He could have been an unrestricted free agent. I believe he wants to be here because he senses a lot of things. Number one, this team is primed to win. When you got a guy like Mike Evans who re-signed, and a guy like Chris Godwin, who we're probably going to talk about as weapons, big left tackle Tristan Wirfs, who's one of his best friends on this team, that are all here. That helped his decision to come back. But I think I think for the first time in 2 or 3 years, he feels wanted. He feels like he can be the guy here long-term, 3 years from now, 2-3 years from now. I think that's made a big difference. And he is gutsy. He's not the biggest guy. I'm here to tell you, though, he's a leader, and that team is following him right now. And so those are all positive things if you're in the Buccaneer camp.
Well, the last time the Broncos faced Baker Mayfield, he was briefly with the Rams. That was on Christmas Day in 2022, and Mayfield torched them in the 51-14 win by the Rams before going 24 for 28 with a 124.7 passer rating in that game. But for the Broncos here, obviously, they run into a situation. You brought up Chris Godwin. The Broncos have had some success, at least with Pat Surtain on a top receiver. He had a rough game against George Pickens, not that it made all that much of a difference. But now you have multiple receiving targets with the Buccaneers. You talk about Chris Godwin. Now they've played him a little bit more into the slot where he seems to be thriving. So what is it with the receiving core now and all of the opportunities that Baker Mayfield has in front of him with so many different targets out of the backfield at tight end and at wide receiver?
Yeah, those two guys are quite the tandem, and I'll give you the little stat here if it didn't all come through. The first 7 completions in Detroit at Ford Field were all to Chris Godwin. Godwin left, Godwin right, Godwin down the middle, including the 41-yard touchdown that your audience and you guys have probably seen the highlight of. So he was the target early. Evans got some catches later on in the game. But this team has more than that. Jalen McMillan, the rookie out of Washington, who was catching touchdowns at the end of last year from Michael Penix in the Pac-12 title game and in the college football playoff, he has already shown out in the preseason and now here to start the regular season. Had a couple of catches in the opening game, including a touchdown. Had a catch again last week. That's a third weapon that can help. Tight end Cade Otton, also from the University of Washington, is a tremendous pass catching tight end, and they love to throw to the backs. Early on in the year, we've already seen the ball being thrown to Rashad White and to Bucky Irving, the rookie out of Oregon. So you got to pick your poison here. You cannot double cover everybody. Mayfield has got a lot of weapons to be able to go to on this offense.
And TJ, I want to talk about a couple of those weapons because, for example, you talked about the potential of a Cade Otton, or you talk about the running backs coming out of the backfield. And, if you look at the overall stats, you see a Broncos team that's only allowed about 135-ish yards through the air so far on average over the course of the first two games. But we, of course, have to factor in the fact that was, Geno Smith and then, Justin Fields last week here in Denver. Much different basis when we talk about Baker Mayfield. So in looking at somebody like, for example, Cade Otton, this is a Broncos defense that for the last several seasons has been extremely susceptible to the big men over the middle, to the tight ends, getting it done in short yard catches and then turning it into yards after the catch. They have been susceptible to that in that linebacker level of their defense. Is this a game where you think you see some play calling that tries to take advantage of that, to use the short dump offs or to use the short dump offs to the tight end? Do you believe the Bucs see a vulnerability there that they can try to exploit?
And maybe it will, because Cade Otton has not done much in the first couple of games, but he was a favorite target of Mayfield, especially down the stretch of the season. So you might be on to something, because again, just to back up a step, the Buccaneers have another new offensive coordinator. So this is the second year in a row that they brought in a new guy, a new system, and Dave Canales was the guy a year ago. And do we say at this point the reward or the promotion to go be the head coach of Carolina? Do we still consider that a reward or promotion? Poor Dave. At this point, he took that job. I understand why he took it. But Liam Cohen has come in, who was in the Rams fold with Sean McVay, and then last year was the University of Kentucky offensive coordinator. So he's getting acclimated to everything he has, is my point. But Canales' offense featured Cade Otton a lot more down the stretch of last season, and I think they'll get back around to some of that. So maybe that's a variable for the Buccaneers as the tight end outlet. They've needed him to block as well. They had trouble. They could not block Aiden Hutchinson last week. You got a backup right guard that had to play backup right tackle. The starting right tackle, Luke Gedeke, is in concussion protocol. To my knowledge, has still not cleared that yet. May clear it today, may clear it tomorrow. That's advantage Broncos if he can't go on the right end. But Otton was my point, having to stay in to help block some in the game last week in Detroit. But as the season goes, and maybe it's starting this week, he'll become more of a variable for the Buccaneer pass game.
Todd Bowles, the Buccaneers head coach, I had a really interesting comment yesterday that I liked. It was talking about, we're not out to try to prove everybody wrong. We're out to try to prove ourselves right. The same people that are patting us on the back were the same people talking about us and expecting to win nothing. But the idea that for the Buccaneers, they've believed in the room and they're not really concerned about the outside influence. Look, a lot of coaches will say that. A lot of players take that. But you see the video of Bowles, at least out here, saying that. And I saw a lot of authenticity in that. And I've thought that over Bowles' career, a guy that's really well regarded, really well thought of. I've always thought he was a good head coach. The records really haven't panned out for him. But this year feels like something's different.
Well, and to your point, a year ago, this was supposed to be a disaster. Post Tom Brady, salary cap hell. Baker Mayfield's not wanted by anybody. Todd Bowles, questionable as a head coach, blah, 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 blah. Well, all they did was go out and win 9 games, win the division, win a playoff game. So that was chip on your shoulder, prove them wrong, if you will. And so now you come in with a bigger expectation. Now, a lot of the talk has been Atlanta to win the division. But, I mean, maybe we're biased. This is a veteran-laden team that won the division the last 3 years. And guys like Evans and Godwin, who we've been talking about, Tristan Wirfs, the left tackle, Levante David, fantastic linebacker, even in his 13th season, Winfield when healthy, Jamel Dean, the cover corner, they all won the Super Bowl, guys. You know, that ring thing, they all got one of those. So they can impress, forget about the coaching staff on all the younger guys, about winning. And so I think that's a lot of what Todd Bowles means there, that we have our own standard in the room here. We have veterans that have done this before, and let everybody else chirp about Atlanta or how good New Orleans has looked, and rightfully so. We'll just keep taking care of business one week at a time here in the short term. And eventually, if you win enough, that's the narrative. Nobody else has got any choice. That became the situation last year when everybody said, oh, this team is finished. Back-to-back games in Atlanta and Green Bay. This is where the season dies. They won them both, and they changed the whole narrative. So that's the point.
Well, and I would think, TJ, that some of those vets being on the field, in the locker room, on the sideline is also what, in addition to just the sort of love that Baker Mayfield was feeling, he's been surrounded by a support structure that he hasn't had in some of his previous stops.
Yeah, bingo. And you're going to be a lot better quarterback throwing the ball to number 13, Mike Evans. And that's going to be fun if it's Surtain against him on Sunday for how often can Mike get open, how much does Surtain win. But when you're having the weapons that he has at his disposal, it makes you a better quarterback. So now the question becomes, do you try to do too much? Do you take too much on you? And we haven't seen that so far here down the stretch of last season, the beginning of this year. And I loved his moxie. We keep using that word at the end of the game last week, where he scrambled and got a key first down in the red zone. And then they came right back to a quarterback draw that he scored on. He's not going to make you forget Lamar Jackson or Cam Newton or Michael Vick in the Robert Griffin III when healthy in the open field to take off and go 60, 70, 80 yards. But this guy can make plays with his feet and keep things alive with his feet. And that's another variable for the Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield.
Obviously, we cover the Broncos out here, and we look pretty intensely at them. But I'm curious how they're reflected to the outside. The Broncos now with the longest streak of playoff-less seasons of any team that immediately prior to that won the Super Bowl. They've kind of been in no man's land now for the majority of a decade. For the Buccaneers this week, besides Pat Surtain, who I think everyone understands is a top-tier talent, what have the Buccaneers looked at and said, here's what we have to worry about from Denver?
You're going to laugh. Do not laugh me out of the room. Lundy, don't laugh me out of the room. Bo Nix as a rookie quarterback, because all through the Bucs history, you see littered with rookie quarterbacks or first-time starting quarterbacks that come in and do damage against this team for whatever reason. And a lot of it is bad Buccaneer football in the 80s and the 90s when they had 14 straight losing seasons. You think you're dry in the desert in Denver figuratively? I know you're a mile high, but the Bucs were dry for 14 years without a winning season. So I think the ultimate concern here early on is, does Bo Nix play well and make some things happen that he hasn't had happen in the first couple of games? Can they get to him early? Can they rattle him early on the road? Loud crowd, etc. I think that's as big a variable as anything, because one thing Buccaneer fans are dubious about right now, Nate Lundy, is Bo Nix going to come in and play really well against this defense or not? And it is being talked about in this market about what rookie quarterbacks or first-time quarterbacks have done against the Bucs.
Well, the problem right now is that he's got a head coach, TJ, that's calling plays that take longer to get out of his mouth than the play clock. That's actually one of the issues. TJ, because we've got you here, I want to take a second to talk about the NFC South, which, in addition to talking about the Bucs, obviously you pay very close attention to the division, just like we do with Kansas City, Vegas, and LA with the Chargers. Are you surprised to see the Saints at 2-0?
Yes, especially that. I've seen some of that with the highlights, but that win in Dallas, I don't know what to make of that, but that was as eye-opening a game as there has been maybe early on in this regular season, that they went in there and plowed them for 4 quarters. So clearly Carr has got the offense clicking with the deep pass game. Alvin Kamara came alive last week. Saints very dangerous, and they again have been like voodoo in the bayou. They have been the Buccaneer voodoo or juju. So that is going to be tough for the two matchups with them. And again, what do we make of Atlanta and the Kirk Cousins situation? For 58.5 minutes the other night, they were in dire straits and looking like they were about to be 0-2 with calls for maybe Michael Penix, to mention that name again, to be going in at quarterback for Cousins in the near future. Instead, Cousins leads the last-minute drive. They win the game. It calms everything down. So they've got a head-to-head meeting with New Orleans coming next weekend. Those are obviously suitable challengers, and this will probably end up being a division that comes down to the final game or two, the final couple of weeks, where somebody that's 10-7, 9-8, or 10-7 wins this thing on a tiebreaker. But it'll be a battle right now between those three. Atlanta's got too much talent on offense to not be good for somebody, for Kirk Cousins, for Penix, for Matt Ryan, for Steve Bartkowski, for God's sake. Somebody could get out there and make it happen with Atlanta's weapons. But yeah, this will be fun in the South. I think it'll be salty. It'll be the Saints and the Buccaneers do not like each other. And personal fouls galore, pushing and shoving after plays. Mike Evans getting suspended by the league for going after Marshawn Lattimore, their DB. That's happened. So stay tuned on Buccaneers Saints and 2 games coming up.
Man, dropping Steve Bartkowski, I was getting then immediately like William Andrews in my head.
William Andrews for 5 bonus points.
That's right. All those 1,000-yard seasons for Andrews back there. But to get an idea, guys, of how crazy the Saints start is, plus 62 in point differential, almost double the next best team in the league, which is the Chargers over in the AFC West. If that held up for the rest of the year, last year that would have been 9th in the entire NFL. There were 5 teams that made the playoffs that had a point differential fewer than what the Saints have now. So, I mean, what they've done to start is
right.
Absolutely, over the whole season, it's absolutely bonkers what they're doing under new offensive coordinator and name familiar to Denver fans, Clint Kubiak. But in this game, Nate and I put it this way. We are not the rah-rah types. Nate and I both think, TJ, that this is going to be the Broncos losing it by double digits in this game. We think they're going to get blasted. I ask you to flip the script. Based on what you've seen from these two teams, is there any reason we're wrong?
Well, I just mentioned Bo Nix. Does he play well? I think another thing is, are the Bucs careless with the football? Turnovers are a great equalizer, especially for the road team coming in if the home team's turning the ball over. All I know is this. Bo Nix was talking yesterday about practicing in the heat in Alabama in high school and playing at Auburn. My man has been at Oregon the last couple of years, and you guys are familiar with all of this. Pacific Northwest, that ain't the same thing as July and August and September. And I know he's there in Denver. It is not the same thing as being here. The Broncos are going to be in the dark jerseys. Have we established, break news to me, are they in the orange or are they in the dark colored jersey? I would assume they're going to be in the orange.
They might be in warm-up jerseys that they get at Dick's Sporting Goods. TJ, I have no. I mean, you think I'm paying attention to the east side of this?
I'm just saying that they're going to be in the orange. All right, so the
third game last year, Denver was in that area. Third game last year, they were down in Miami.
Got there.
Remember what happened?
They gave up
70, and that was being kind. The Dolphins could have scored 100 that day if they felt like it. And yeah, the Broncos tempting fate by going with those oranges in Game 3 in Florida 2 years in a row.
I guess they feel better than the dark blue. It will be a factor, and even though the Commanders' opening game was a later game, it was a 4:30 Eastern game. It was hot, it was humid, they were in the dark jerseys, and it wore on them as the third quarter became the fourth quarter. So that is a factor. But if Nix plays well to whatever extent, and the Bucs are benevolent with mistakes and with turnovers, Denver can absolutely hang in and have a chance to win the game. Best case scenario for the Bucs, let Nix make mistakes, beat on the Broncos with the run game, wear them down, and put them away in the second half because of the heat.
Well, that's a lot of would-be, could be, should be, but we'll find out on Sunday. Obviously, nowhere to go but up for the Broncos, both on week 3s in Florida and at 0-2 in the start. TJ Rives joining us from Tampa Bay to break it all down. Catch him on the sideline on the Buccaneers Radio Network. Thanks so much for giving us an opportunity to look at it. What's one of the league's most fascinating teams, not only this year, but as really in the last year and a half, as the Bucs have really made things very, very fascinating in the NFC. So really
great to be with you. Great to be with you guys. Brother Lundy, Fox Sports Radio alumni brother, always good to be with you. By the way, I leave you with the stat. I do my own original research here on Mile High Sports Today. If you start the season 3-0 since 1970 in the AFL-NFL merger, that is a 74% clip that you make the playoffs.
Yes, sir.
Buccaneers have a chance to be 3-0, and it's not just them. It's the Minnesota Vikings, the Saints, the Chargers. There are a lot of teams that have a chance, Kansas City, to be 3-0. 3-0 is kind of a big deal for whatever that's worth. 74% clip. Let's see what it looks like.
And something the Bucs have not done since 2005,
which is be 3-0.
That's correct. Is to be 3-0. So they got a chance to do it for the first time in nearly 2 decades. TJ, love you, brother. Thank you for some time.
Great to be with you guys.
Thanks so much.
TJ Rives, who has to sit out, Sean, in that humidity on the sidelines when he's doing all that. TJ, one of the best. I've been a guest on his podcast before. He mentioned the fact that he and I are both alumnus of Fox Sports Radio. and having been a part of the staff and the on-air crew with Fox Sports. So TJ's one of the best, one of my great connections. And it's always, we like going behind enemy lines, but it's also nice to be able to do that with some guys that really truly are, he's on the field. He knows this stuff inside and out. So TJ's a great guy.
It's a smidge concerning that his thing that the Buccaneers are worried about is historically they've had a tough time with first-year quarterbacks. So maybe Bo Nix out of the blue will be
let's
amazing.
Be honest, Sean. The folks that spend the time looking through blue and orange glasses are looking for anything possible to be able to latch onto. Hey, Broncos practice and everything going on today. And it's time for us to be able to chat with our local guy this time, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, we'll have a chance to talk to Cody Roark. I want to remind you, of course, we've had a chance. You hear me talk about the Denver Athletic Club an awful lot on these airwaves, and there's a reason for it. Look, it's been the heart of Denver for more than a century, and if you're looking for the perfect place to work, play, exercise, and socialize, that's your spot. As a DAC member, you'll enjoy the top-notch amenities you expect. Of course, the full fitness center, naturally, but licensed child care center in case you need a little bit of a break there when you're working out. A spa, massage, Pilates, golf simulators, and more. But what truly sets that DAC apart, what's kept it this way for so long, is that vibrant community. It's member owned, and it makes it all about those members, offering year-round social events, co-working, dining, fun for the entire family. The Denver Athletic Club is truly a club for your whole life. So join the DAC today. Visit denverathleticClub.cc for all of the details. We had a chance to talk to our pal Cody Roark a little bit here as it's out at Dove Valley. And so we will turn our attention to the Broncos from as you put it out, our local guy, Cody Roark. Joining us now is our lead writer for the Denver Broncos here at Mile High Sports and the host of the Locked On Broncos podcast, Cody Roark. You get a chance to talk to him every single week here. We're delighted to do so. Cody, thanks. Obviously, you get ready for practice today out at Dove Valley. We have a chance to look at the Broncos injury situation, which all of a sudden went from nobody on the injury report to a bunch of starters on the injury report. How concerning are the majority of these? We know about Estime, of course, is on IR already. We know that Mike McGlinchey placed on IR. That's the big one. Maybe that's where we'll start. Alex Palczewski probably expected to get the nod, but what do the Broncos intend to do to adjust?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a big adjustment without your starting right tackle. They signed to a 5-year contract just right before last offseason. And obviously, McGlinchey's had some up and down play, and certainly when he was in there, wasn't always great, but I mean, you're losing a starter, you're losing continuity in the offensive line, and you need that, I think, especially when you have a rookie quarterback who's also going through his own, array of struggles right now. Alex Palczewski will get the start for the Broncos, will fill in at right tackle for Mike McGlinchey through these 4 weeks that, they're going to be without him. I'm very intrigued to see how he does because he's been a player that obviously made the 53-man roster last year, is a developmental prospect that I know that the team is very, very high on. And now you're going to see some live action reps, with him. And look, I also think, granted 4 games, I don't think is a big enough sample size, but I know Mike just signed his contract extension, but you're also getting a potential look at, hey, if it doesn't work out, if McGlinchey's performance is still up and down inconsistent, and there's a young guy you have on your roster who has more college starts and more college games than Bo Nix. Palczewski had 64 career games in his college career. Bo Nix is 61. Maybe you have a young guy you can look to in the future. But the hope is that McGlinchey will be back for that Thursday night game against the New Orleans Saints. Just the timing of it's not ideal, considering the offense is the one area, honestly, that is really struggling to produce. It's struggling to put up points, struggling to even move the football, protect sometimes consistently, run blocking. Nothing's opening up there. And so now you're running into a scenario where, okay, you're without one guy. Garrett Bowles has already had a little bit of a banged-up ankle, though this week he's not on the injury report. That's a good sign. But McGlinchey being out, definitely problematic for an offense that still doesn't know what their identity is just yet. And without your starters, how are you going to find your identity? Maybe you find it in this situation right here, but not ideal for the Broncos to start the year.
No, it isn't. And obviously, when you're talking about trying to find that identity, when you look at the offense, obviously we know that all the players can play better. We get that. But let's look at the play calling on the offense. There's not a lot of pre-snap movement. There's not a lot of play action involved. There's not a lot of deception in the run game. There's a lot of dive left and dive right type of plays. Is this a diverse enough offense from the play calling perspective to actually generate an identity? What seems to be the plan here? Because it's surprising, I think, to a lot of folks to see a Sean Payton offense look so, well, quite frankly, bland.
Yeah, I mean, I said it this morning. The offense for Sean Payton so far, as we're sitting here going into week 3, looks like the same exact offense from last year in terms of efficiency, productivity, things like that. Third down still a major issue. Red zone still an issue for them. Inability to run the football still an issue for them. I think it's problematic that Bo Nix has the third most passing attempts in the regular season right now after just 2 games. That's not a formula for winning. And look, we could talk about Bo. Look, Bo, and this is the thing I always want to make clear to Broncos fans. Bo is struggling. Absolutely. Bo has not looked like how anybody thought Bo would look. He certainly hasn't looked how he's looked in training camp or the preseason. Bo hasn't looked how Bo has wanted to look himself. But you're going to have to live with that. He's a rookie. He's going to go through these growing pains. He's embracing them. And he's got to continue to make these mistakes, but he's also got to continue to grow. Like, even though he didn't play the best last week, there were certain areas of his game where he was stepping up in the pocket, doing some things, being a little bit more patient at times before abandoning a play and using his legs to run. That's going to take time. So I'm not worried about Bo. I am a little more worried about Sean Payton's offense a little bit, though. And part of me, too, I was even thinking about it. Joe Lombardi was calling plays in the preseason. The offense seemed to have good rhythm, seemed to be able to, run the ball here and there, and also had an emphasis on, I would say, not taking as much time. I remember Chase Daniel had said, Bo Nix hasn't experienced Sean Payton on the headset just yet, where he's like, hey, what hash are we on? Okay, we're doing this. Oh, wait, no. Let's do this play. Like, we saw that happen, I think, last week, where Bo was even signaling, like, hey, we need to get the play in because they're running up against the clock. And I think you just have to put your quarterback in a position to succeed. Can Sean Payton delegate back to Joe Lombardi or even Pete Carmichael? Both those guys, I think both of them are up in the box. Why not let Joe Lombardi call plays and then him manage the flow of the game? Be the decision maker guy. To me, he said he's going to have to simplify the offense. I'm curious to see what that's going to look like, all of these circumstances considered, and the schedule for them doesn't get any easier.
It does not. Obviously, you're talking about 2 more defensively minded head coaches they'll be facing in Tampa Bay and New York. We could be staring 0-4 or 4 in the face. So it's a concern. But let's go back to that Payton offense, because last year we were told, not only by a lot of the folks in the Broncos, but by Sean Payton, that the problem was it was Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson needed it dumbed down, and we needed to simplify for Russell Wilson because it was too complicated for the 10-year vet. Quite frankly, at this point, that looks like that wasn't true. Am I missing something?
No, look, Russell Wilson's one of the smartest guys I've been around, in terms of the quarterback position. He's very smart the way he does it. Bo Nix, very, very smart in terms of what he's able to do at the position and his knowledge of the game. And so I think when you're combining all this verbiage and the thing is, and Adam Troutman told, media this yesterday, is that, Bo's doing a great job echoing the play call. He's doing a great job calling out the protection, getting us into our checks and our audibles. But sometimes when you don't have a lot of time, it can be a little problematic, or, sometimes the execution isn't there. And so I think that the dilemma I think we have here is Sean's offense. He wants it to be this high octane, run the football stuff, but it's become a little problematic because Denver hasn't been able to do these things so far in the year and a half he's been here. At what point do you ask, and even said this, is it on us as coaches? Are we asking our players to do things that they can't do? Or is it us as coaches? I think that's where the evolution, that conversation has to happen. This is, when you're starting off 0-2 and now you have a tough 2-game road trip, the man in the mirror conversation becomes a little bit more prevalent in a situation like this. So I'm not sure what Sean has in terms of talk to himself, about this. I'm not sure what Sean has talked to the coaching staff about in regards to maybe what they plan to do. They can't keep doing the things that they're doing right now. We say the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So far, we've seen that. And the common denominator has to be the offense, not necessarily the quarterback, because you have 2 quarterbacks who are very smart, who can run it. But maybe the offense is a little outdated at some aspects in terms of how it's being able to be executed.
Yeah, the common denominator in this case is Sean Payton. 3 different quarterbacks in his stint. And obviously with Stidham and Nix, they were both relatively short comparatively. But the scoring is substantially down from the games in which Russell Wilson was the starter. And I think when you look at the Sean Payton situation here, it is kind of fascinating because the Adam Troutman quote where he praised Bo Nix and talked about getting him in the right protections and all that, he actually also said, once he gets the play in, once he gets the play. And I noticed that was something that I immediately picked out of that quote, because that was basically the player's way of saying, like, hey, look, Bo Nix is doing what he can when he gets the play, but it's taking way too long to get the play in. And this is what we knew all last year with Russell Wilson. Peyton was able to deflect and say, oh, well, that's Russell Wilson's fault. Russell Wilson doesn't understand. But now all of a sudden, with Jarrett Stidham having the same issues, with Bo Nix having the same issues, we do have to look at the common denominator. It's the guy calling the plays that's taking it too long to come in. That's Sean Payton.
Yeah. And look, Sean's a smart coach. And I think Sean, the vision that he has and the ideology in terms of his offensive scheme, I mean, I've seen it when watching the tape. There are things that I see, like, oh, that's what he means by trying to, open things up with this play. Like, you can see how he's trying to scheme guys open. But when you're having, one-dimensional offensive issues where you can't run the ball outside the tackles, you can't run the ball consistently in between the tackles, you have no hot hand. Sometimes your ball carriers aren't seeing the holes that open up. Like, what do you expect a rookie quarterback to do when really teams are just trying to play you at this point, to just say, hey, we're sitting back, we're playing in zone coverage because we know on first and second down you can't do anything. And now we know you have to throw it here on third down. We're going to play outside. We're going to funnel everything in and short. We're going to rally and tackle and force you to deal with it. That doesn't make Bo Nix's job any easier. And people are like, well, put Zach Wilson, put Jarrett Stidham in. They're going to have the same exact struggles with the same situation. And so it's not about the quarterback. It's about, is the system too much for these players? And not to say that the players can't handle it, but at what point do you say, like, hey, let's just make it easy? Like, the New Orleans Saints have simplified their offense, a lot. And look, they're playing free. They're playing loose. They're getting a play call quick. They're getting a high volume of plays called, on the stretch of an entire game. And so Denver has to get back to that because they don't have any efficiency whatsoever right now on anything that they're doing on the offensive side of the ball. Their best offense so far has been special teams and defense. And look, the defense last week against the Steelers, they did everything that they could to give Denver's offense the best opportunity to win that game or even to try to score. I mean, in the second half, you hold Pittsburgh to, on 6 of their 7 second half possessions, you force them to punt the football away. That's the defense doing its job, all circumstances considered. And so, at this point, it's like, when does the conversation become larger on how can you fix the Broncos offense? Sean, I don't know how Denver can fix the offense right now. I don't know if it's necessarily a scheme issue. I don't know if it's a personnel issue. It could be a combination of both, but you can't just sit on your hands all year and say, hey, this is just where we're at right now. Find a way to implement solutions, because this is the 53-man roster that you built, and you can make an argument. Maybe some other guys could have helped a lot better than some of the guys that they currently have.
Yeah, and let's angle our attention to the defense quickly, Cody. We're talking to Cody Roark of Mile High Sports, the host of Locked On Podcast as well. So check that out for the Broncos over the course of the season. But on the defensive side, dealing with some injuries, of course, John Franklin Myers with a concussion, Baron Browning with a foot injury. These are two major cogs in that defense. Baker Mayfield is completing 73.5% of his passes with 5 touchdowns in the first couple of games. How serious are those injuries, and what do the Broncos intend to do to stop an offense that is far more explosive potentially than the ones they've faced in the first 2 weeks?
Well, yeah, I mean, Baker's playing with a new level of confidence right now in terms of where he's at the position. And on top of that, you mentioned what he's done in the passing game. I mean, he's got 8 rushing attempts so far this season for 55 yards. 4 of his 8 rushing attempts have moved the chains for a first down this season. So when a play breaks down, the pocket breaks down, Baker's still very good at being able to get outside and run the football to pick up, extra opportunities to extend a possession that they currently have. And then, you have Mike Evans, 6'5". I mean, he's playing incredible football. Chris Godwin is their leading receiver right now with 200 yards on 15 catches. He's seen 16 targets so far in 2 weeks, but they moved him a little bit more so in the slot. Now he's thriving a lot more in the slot. And then you have rookie Jalen McMillan, who came over obviously in the NFL draft from the Washington Huskies. He's obviously a player that's talented at a 32-yard catch, I believe it was last week, against the Lions. They have good depth. And then obviously Rachaad White, I mean, we're not talking about efficiency in terms of running the ball, but out of the backfield, he's making some plays happen. So Cade Otton at the tight end position. Baker has a variety of different weapons right now. And the one thing I said, it's going to come out on Saturday on milehighsports.com, 3 matchups that will define the outcome of the game. Really, they're all defensive focused because this is a challenge for Denver's defense. We all know the offense is struggling, but Denver's defense is going to have their hands full with all those guys. So you can't let Baker Mayfield preheat the oven and get cooking a little bit, because if he does, it's going to be a long afternoon. And the weird vibe too, we're looking at uniforms. Week 2 last year, the Broncos, they wore white at home against the Commanders. They lost that game. Obviously, they had a 21-3 lead. They blew it. The next week, they played the Miami Dolphins, and they wore their orange jerseys on the road. The Broncos opening up the season here this week, week 3, with orange jerseys on the road. Hopefully it's not, and we're seeing the same stuff happen the first few weeks. Hopefully it's not a 70-point outburst here this week. I don't think that's going to be the case. Denver down Barrett Browning, John Franklin Myers. We'll see where he's at today in terms of the concussion protocol. We'll see if Barron maybe upgrades from DMP to limited here today. And then you just got Zach Allen dealing with the shoulder injury, was limited. He's going to continue to fight through that. He's having a terrific season so far for Denver, but they're going to need help defensively this week. Brandon Jones didn't practice yesterday with, I believe it was a foot injury. We'll see if he's back here today. So not ideal with, all the things are going wrong right now for the Broncos. To be banged up on top of that is a little bit problematic.
Yeah, it is. And it's going to be a tough position to get a win regardless. And how this team performs, obviously, the concern around Broncos country, even though the expectation, I think, for most is this wasn't going to be a playoff team. It wasn't expected to be this bad this early either. So he is Cody Roark. Make sure you check out everything that Cody's putting together. You can follow him on social, Cody Roark NFL, over at Mile High Sports, all the content he's putting together. And then with the Locked On Broncos podcast, appreciate the time. I know you're very busy and you've got to head in there in Dove Valley. So we'll let you go. Thanks a lot, Cody.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate you.
All right. Thank you very much. Take care. Cody Roark joining us. Make sure you follow everything. And like you pointed out on Saturday, look at those matchups as well for the Broncos game on Sunday. Of course, we will be back. Week 3 starts now. We're ready. We're there. Thursday night football is upon us. The Patriots and Jets will be kicking it off. And Nate Lundy has some of his best bets for the game. We'll talk about that in a moment.
BYB Bare Knuckle returns to Denver, Colorado, Saturday, September 21st, for the long-awaited rematch of the 2023 Bare Knuckle Boxing Hall of Fame Fight of the Year in one of the greatest bare knuckle battles to ever take place in the Trigon. As former BYB lightweight champion, Mark the Shark Irwin looks to regain his title against the man who took it from him, Julio Tenori. Plus, BYB women's lightweight champion Patty Juarez looks to become BYB's first 2-division women's champion when she faces Courtney Cameron for the BYB super lightweight title. Don't miss these great matchups and much more. Visit BYBExtreme.com for tickets and information.
Well, that sounds like fun this weekend too. But
it's going to be it's going to be great. I mentioned this on yesterday's show, but Mark the Shark Irwin did the interview with our man Jordan with the MMA Plug show earlier this week. That is up on our YouTube channel. You should go check that out. This is going to be a lot of fun this weekend. Snag those tickets. BYBExtreme.com is the website. Grab those tickets. It's really going to be a ton of fun with those fights on Saturday. And I know that the folks behind it, the promoters and everybody behind it are excited to be back here in Denver. And I know the Denver fans, I mean, Sean, we've talked about this before. Denver has always been such a great fight city, whether we're talking about the bare knuckle, where we're talking about BYB, whether we're talking about UFC, MMA, even some of the smaller circuits that have come through. Like, the fan base is always here and always active in Denver. And obviously we know that a ton of these fighters train here. We know why. It's the altitude and things like that. But I'm excited for Saturday night, and I hope everybody has made some plans. Go snag your tickets, BYBExtreme.com.
Yeah, it's going to be a great event. You're right. I mean, UFC 1 was in Denver at McNichols Sports Arena, if you get an idea of how back that actually goes in Colorado. But Nate, now we have week 3 is starting. We have the Patriots and the Jets, 2 teams that I don't think we know that much about yet, and that makes maybe betting these games a little bit challenging. Yeah,
I think it does make it a little bit challenging. And let me give maybe a little bit more of a 20,000 foot level view of how I look at some of these games like this. when we have the primetime games like this, and in truth, this game could be scheduled on a Sunday afternoon, and I would feel the same way about it, but it obviously has a bigger spotlight on it because of the fact that it's in primetime with our friends at Amazon this evening. But when you see a game like this where you can actually sit back as a fan and go, I'm not sure where the scoring is going to come from, right? There's a reason the over-under is sitting there at 38.5. There's a reason that those kinds of things exist. And I think that when you see things like that, for me, I have a tendency from a betting standpoint to back off a little bit from as active as I might be from a betting standpoint on a typical primetime game. Does that make sense, Sean? Because
especially in the early parts of the season too, where everything's small sample size.
Because we're trying to answer questions that we don't necessarily have answers to yet, right. And you're expecting some good defenses. The Jets have a good defense. New England, it's kind of what they have to hang their hat on at this point. And it's part of how they pulled off the win that they did in week 1 over Cincinnati that ruined everybody's survivor pools, including my own. So when we see stuff like that, there's a lot of the games that I would actually focus a lot more on a primetime contest than I necessarily would this one. But I do think, if I'm being honest, I think there are a couple of ways that you can look at this. And the line right now, the Jets are favored by 6. The over-under sits at 38.5. This game could be 15-12. I'm not going to lie. Now, as Brad and I talked about on the Fade 5 podcast this morning, chances are if we're leaning into all the unders, the final score is going to be 52-50. But that said, I don't know where it's going to come from. I will throw this out there if you really want to get crazy. You can get let's see, I think it's plus 4,000 at 40 to 1.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
hold on. Let me
look
this up. I want to make sure that I get this right. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll give you a topic. The French Revolution was neither French nor a revolution. Discuss.
That's not actually true. It was French and it was a revolution.
Some of you
know, you get into Robespierre and
some of you get that reference.
Bastille. Oh, okay.
Some of you get the reference,
I got the reference.
And some of you don't. So yes, I'm sorry. 40 to 1. 40 to 1 tonight.
I told you that.
For their I was making sure that my number was right.
Gotcha.
I know how to translate it.
Yeah, come on.
I was making sure that I was correct when I said plus 4,000, and that I didn't have that incorrect. It is 40 to 1 tonight for there to not be a touchdown.
I don't hate that.
I told Brad on the podcast this morning, I think that's worth $5. I think it's worth $5 for there to not be a touchdown in this game tonight. I'm not so sure that it might not be a 15-12 game. Danny Bailey just grabbed his phone as we speak, and I know for a fact that Danny is about to make that same damn bet. So anyway, it's 40 to 1 tonight for there to not be a touchdown. So before I get to what my bets are, I always like to hand things off to you, Mr. Drotar. What are you thinking about for this evening if you're going to plop some money down on this Thursday nighter on Amazon?
Okay, I do like I like the Jets in this game, and I think that's a big part of it. So I do like the Jets in this game. I'm actually going to change that alt line, and it's possible you're right. There might not be a touchdown. But I'll outline that up to minus 7.5. I think the Jets could win it pretty big. That gets a plus 121 over DraftKings if you're not as comfortable. And maybe when it gets close, maybe I'll think about that. If you just want to go 7 and remove the hook, kind of protect you, the Jets still get you to plus money over there at plus 109 to cover that spread. Not much different than the 6 that it was. As a matter of fact, it opened at 7. So if you went back to just what it was and it opened, you can now get plus money on that. Usually it opens at a minus 110. So if you still think there hasn't been that much of a change, that's a pretty good one. So I do like the Jets in this game. The Bengals started incredibly poorly. They had a couple turnovers in that game. I don't think it's representative of who they are. Yes, they're 0-2, but the game against the Chiefs, in which the Chiefs had to win on a last-second field goal at home, I think is more representative of what the Bengals are. So I just don't think much of the Patriots. They're a bad team that much like the Broncos, does not have a lot of talent. And even though Aaron Rodgers does not look like himself yet, only completing 60% of his passes, it's good enough for me to think the Jets will get by these guys at home.
Okay, I'm good with that. Let me give you you talked about doing it with an alt play. I think there's a number of different ways that we could go with this. I don't have a graphic for this one, so I'm going to need you to follow along with me. But this is a same game parlay that I put together earlier today. And the payout on it is about plus 120. I did this over at DK. I took the game total from the 38 up to 46.5 and played the under. So under 46.5. on the game total. I took New England all the way to plus 14.5. All they have to do is not lose by 2 touchdowns. Okay. Under 46.5, New England to cover at least 14.5. And then 2 unders. One, I'm taking Jacoby Brissett's passing yards all the way up to 215.5, and I'm playing the under. His standard line, it might as well be 120 in my opinion. But I took him all the way up to 215.5. And then here's where we decided to have some fun. Taking the under on Aaron Rodgers rushing yards at 5.5.
I like that. I don't think he's going to.
Aaron Rodgers under 5.5 rushing yards. Jacoby Brissett under 215.5 passing. New England plus 14.5 in the game total under 46.5. That pays you right about plus 120 over at DK.
Well, I'll give you another one over there at DraftKings. It's the same game parlay. And a couple little wrinkles if you wanted. It's overs for me. It's overs, but they're not high. Aaron Rodgers passing yards of over 175.
He may not hit that number. I just want to throw that out real quick.
And that's why
he may not hit that number.
I didn't want to go any higher than that. I didn't even blink at the 200. I'm like, no, I'm looking at 175. Get over that. So that's all it takes for Breece Hall rushing and receiving combined. 75 yards. That seems to be based on his averages, a pretty reasonable number. And Ramondre Stevenson, 60 rushing yards. He's kind of all they got. He's getting 20 plus carries per game and over 100 yards a game. So I like that as well. That gets you to a plus 150. Not terrible. Now, if you really want to have a little bit of fun with it, Hunter Henry has been the primary target for Jacoby Brissett. He's averaging almost 8 targets a game. His over-under in this game is 3.5. So he needs basically half of what he's been getting. Dump-offs irrelevant, just the receptions. If you want to add the receptions, so it's Aaron Rodgers a plus 175 yards or more through the air, Breece Hall 75 combined yards, Ramondre Stevenson 60 rushing yards, and Hunter Henry gets 4 catches. That plus 150 goes to plus 430. Don't really hate that.
No, that's not bad at all. That's a big time jump that you can get out of that one. All right. You talked about the rushing plus receiving for Breece Hall, correct?
I did.
All right, folks, let's jump to it. Let's get to my same game parlay for tonight that I built over at DraftKings. This one has a payday for you of plus 256. You see it right there on the screen. This is easy. All this is each of these 4 guys for rushing plus receiving. It's their combined offensive production. So Sean talked about Breece Hall, which I agree with. That's at 75. Ramondre Stevenson, same thing at 75. Then we're going to go with Antonio Gibson, who has been kind of a bright light, if you will. It's like all of a sudden he looks like the guy that we used to see back with the Commanders
when he had a funnier nickname.
And he, as well as Braylon Allen, who is another new name that if you play fantasy, you're familiar with. Those 2 guys need to have 25 apiece of rushing and receiving. So Stevenson and Hall at 75. Gibson and Allen at 25. You put that together, it is a plus 256 at DraftKings. Folks, that's no boost or anything like that. And a lot of the books out there will give you boosts on these primetime games specifically for same game parlays. So you may be able to go out there and find a 25%, 30%, 50%, whatever boost, and you may be able to massage this to your liking when it comes to what your particular book is offering to you. So I wanted to share that particular same game parlay that I put together for you. Again, it's all rushing plus receiving yards, which gives you a little bit of a cushion, right? If Breece Hall doesn't necessarily do it on the ground, but he breaks off a 19-yard reception, something like that, it gives you a little bit of cushion in terms of putting those 2 numbers together. Now, I told you that there was a lot about this Thursday night game that I stay away from with some of the player props because you're not necessarily sure where some of the offense is going to come from. The Jets have very good defense. You can slow down New England. And, let's face it, what New England has defensively is the only thing they've really got. And there's a little thing about history with the Jets taking on the Patriots that you never really know what to expect. That's why I did that alt line to 14.5. But there are some props in baseball tonight that I like. And if you're new to all of this with me, you know that I put a spreadsheet up on Twitter. It is pinned right to the top of my profile. It is a Google sheet that is completely free. I don't do anything on a paid Discord or any of that crap. My picks are posted on a spreadsheet. They're free. Have fun. And I track my winnings and my losses so you can see what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. And some folks have stopped doing baseball bets because we're at the point where everybody just wants to pay attention to the NFL.
Which is funny because we talk about the large sample sizes. Baseball, you've got the most now of sample sizes.
You've got the most. You've also got teams that just don't give a bleep anymore. Okay, I mean, like or you're getting to the point where you've got teams that are in wild card hunts or are looking at how they're going to be positioned here in a couple of weeks when the playoffs start, and they're taking on a guy that got called up from AAA to throw 4 innings. Right. So I'm going to put this out here because it doesn't happen very often. All right. Logan Gilbert is going to be on the bump for Seattle this afternoon. And this is coming up here in about 30 minutes. Okay. So if you want to play this, you got to do it now. So hopefully you're watching us live on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter right now, and you're not watching this after the fact, or you're going to miss out. Aaron Judge has a lifetime average against Gilbert of 273. It's not a massive sample size for Aaron Judge against Gilbert, but his lifetime average,
I feel like there's a but,
is 273 against Gilbert. He faced him earlier this year and had a double. He went 2 for 4. He had a double, a single. He walked once. Fielder's choice, I think, on one of those that he had. But Sean, if you're going to tell me that I can take Aaron Judge for 2 or more total bases at plus 140,
home run counts as 4, right? Still, yeah.
Aaron Judge's total bags number from an odds standpoint, folks, is usually anywhere between minus 110 and plus 120. It's usually right in that range. I know the Yankees are on the road. I know Logan Gilbert is not a bad pitcher, but you're giving me one of the biggest power dudes in the MLB at plus 140 to have 2 total bags. Yes, I will take that. I will tell you it's plus 125 at DraftKings. That plus 140 is at Bet365. A couple other guys that I like for this evening, in case you are catching us on the replay. Happy Patrick Corbin Day, everybody. All right, let's celebrate whenever Patrick Corbin trots out to the mound for the Nats. He will be on the north side of Chicago at the Gum Factory, Wrigley Field. And the Cubs are heavy favorites in this one. But a couple of guys that have a great history against Patrick Corbin are Patrick Wisdom of the Chicago Cubs, as well as Dansby Swanson. Both of those guys have a very strong history against Corbin. So you can go and pop those 2 guys together to each have a hit, and you can get yourself pretty close to plus odds. Worst case is if you want to add the Northsiders just on the money line against the Nats, you could also do that. There's a couple other wrinkles that you could do with this if you really wanted to, but if you're looking for hit props, make sure you jump on Wisdom and you jump on Dansby Swanson, because they've both got really good history against Patrick Corbin. And look, we like to pick on there's a handful of guys we like to pick on in the MLB. Patrick Corbin is at the top of that list. Austin Gomber is number 2 on that list, in my opinion. So take advantage of it while you have the opportunity. Keep an eye on the Mets and the Phillies today, by the way, at Citi Field. I think the over-under in that one is set at about 8 as a flat 8. I would alt it down if I were you, but I think we're going to see some runs in that game. It might finish right at 8, which is why I don't mind the idea of pulling it down to like maybe 6.5 or 7.5.
Rockies are off today. They'll be back at it tomorrow in LA against the
Can't
Dodgers.
They just mercy rule this crap?
You get the Dodgers on the road. How about this? It's a Friday.
Why do you have to
right?
finish?
The Kyle Freeland will take the hill against, and it is Thursday afternoon against undecided. Right now for the Dodgers, undecided, because they've sort of realized we can just roll out anybody.
Have you seen how good undecided is?
And the best moment in baseball, did you get to see it yesterday when the Brewers clinched their playoff spot?
Yes, I did.
Oh, and Jackson Chariot, of course, they're perhaps the rookie of the year in the National League. He's too young to drink.
Yes.
He's 20 years old. He's got 21 home runs, but he's not 21 years old. They rolled out a selection of non-alcoholic champagnes and beers with a collection with what's the hat, the playoff hat, and some bobbleheads with his jersey draped over a baby carriage, which is just stellar. And rolled it into the locker room when everyone else was celebrating with the champagne and everything else.
I think that's great. I'll also leave you with this before we get to a Football Friday for tomorrow. Sean, do you know on the secondary market the cheapest NFL game you can go to on Sunday?
on Sunday. I was like, maybe it should be this one on Sunday.
The cheapest game on the secondary market that you can get into right now for about $30.
$30.
I just gave you the answer.
Oh,
the Bucs and the Broncos.
Yikes.
That is the cheapest game on the secondary market right now in the NFL.
Wow.
That tells you just how this is going to be on Sunday.
Yeah, well, for the Broncos, more than likely. We'll break it all down on a Football
Cheapest
Friday
game
for you. Thanks so much to Cody Roark.
You can get in the door
$30
for $30.
$30 to go watch the Buccaneers, the Broncos.
I mean, granted, it's going to be a little hot.
Yeah, I was like, nobody
humid,
wants to sit in that heat and humidity. That's part of it.
Hey, I sat through the heat on the east side stands on Sunday for that debacle against the Steelers. I was roasting.
It's probably more than $33.
Holy crap.
On
I was
top of
hot.
that, but hopefully fall gets moving around. It's supposed to be some snow
Cheapest
in
game.
the forecast in the mountains tonight.
Keep your snow to yourself.
No, bring it all. Give me all. Give me all.
Colorado born and raised. Right.
Give me all of it. Every single bit of it. It also makes football games more fun to watch. Not that we'll have it this weekend, but we'll talk more about this as we go along. Thanks to Cody Roark for joining us. TJ Rives from the Buccaneers Radio Network joined us. If you missed any part of that, definitely go back and catch it. Great look behind enemy lines there. TJ's a blast to talk to, so make sure you catch all of it. We do it all for you. Thanks so much. However you consume the show, whenever you find it convenient, we do that as well. Good luck. I'm going to bet that no touchdown thing tonight. That's a good idea.
40-1, folks. 40-1 for there to be no touchdowns in this game.
Mediocre football.
More than likely, your bet is going to be going to be gone.
You want my hedge?
But if something weird happens,
I'm doing 2. I'm doing on 0 and I'm doing on 1. And if I just do 1 unit on each, if either one hits, I make a lot of money.
The other thing you can do, by the way, the over under on total touchdowns in the game is 4. Take the under. There's
no way they're making 4 touchdowns in this game. Of course, we'll come back and it'll be 50-48.
If it's 5, but here's the thing: if it's 5, you're going to hit the over, and there's nobody that thinks this game is going to hit the over.
No, absolutely not. So it makes a lot of sense. We'll talk
15
more about
to 12. That's what I want.
15 to 12. All field goals. Kickers delight. Oh man.
So what is there? Sly, I think, is the kicker for the Pats that none of us have ever heard of. Sly.
Oh yeah, Joey Sly.
Joey Sly.
Joey Sly. There's some good names among the kickers too. They're the stars this year.
Joey Sly.
Stars.
Joey Sly sounds like he would have competed in the breakdancing in the Olympics.
Yeah. The Sly Gun or something like that.
Yeah.
And, Brandon Aubrey, maybe the talk this week in Dallas is maybe he's going to get a 70-yard field goal. Kickers are the new quarterbacks, everybody. Or so it seems. We'll talk about it on a Football Friday. Thanks to Danny Bailey for making it all work. He's Nate Lundy. I'm Sean Drotar. This is Mile High Sports.
BYB Bare Knuckle returns to Denver, Colorado, Saturday, September 21st, for the long-awaited rematch of the 2023 Bare Knuckle Boxing Hall of Fame Fight of the Year in one of the greatest bare knuckle battles to ever take place in the Trigon. As former BYB lightweight champion, Mark the Shark Irwin looks to regain his title against the man who took it from him, Julio Tenori. Plus, BYB women's lightweight champion Patty Juarez looks to become BYB's first 2-division women's champion when she faces Courtney Cameron for the BYB super lightweight title. Don't miss these great matchups and much more. Visit BYBExtreme.com for tickets and information.